When it comes to heavy bicep curls, should you go light and focus intently on the squeeze, or should you go heavy and just push yourself as hard as possible, lifting as much weight as possible? On a side note, I think this question actually goes far beyond just bicep curls, but that's what we're going to be focusing on for today.
Tristan, why do you lift so light? Oftentimes you'll see me curling 25 or 35 pound dumbbells. Hell, there's even tons of videos on the internet of me curling those good old colored fibers. But why? A small muscle group like the bicep doesn't actually require an excessive amount of load to stimulate muscle growth. Most people's attempt at progressively overloading the bicep curl is just an excuse to ego lift and swing the weight up in a way that makes me cringe like no other. Trust me, we've all seen those horrific torn bicep videos. Ego lifting is one of the most common yet one of the most easily preventable mistakes that young lifters make. With whatever exercise you're doing, the goal should be to bias the particular muscle group and eliminate as much of the other surrounding muscle groups as possible. Don't sacrifice the tension on your bicep if it means that you're going to be using your front delt, your lats, and all of the other surrounding muscle groups. If you're looking for the most muscle growth, drop the ego, prioritize time under tension, and focus on controlled movements whenever you're training.
In general, I think there is some truth in what he's saying. When doing bicep curls, you shouldn't swing your arms like some sort of deformed pendulum. The bicep curl isn't a full body exercise. You want to make sure that you're actually focusing on the targeted muscle group, that being, of course, the biceps in this case. But at the same time, you actually need to still load the muscle. And then this hyper focus on the mind-muscle connection will probably end up doing more harm than good. Believe me, I think a strong mind-muscle connection is very important. I just don't think you should sacrifice load, or it should come at the expense of, overloading your muscle. Like personally, when I do bicep curls, I can't really feel anything over like 30 pounds. If I were to do anything under 30 pounds, I'd probably end up having to do a bunch of reps. And when you're doing all those reps, it's very time consuming and it's very mentally taxing as well. Like, it's one thing to push yourself for the last like 3 or 4 reps, but to do that for the last like 10 or 15 reps, that takes a lot of mental fortitude. And when it comes to a lot of this stuff, you're kind of on a battery in that, like, you can't push yourself too hard for too long without facing some consequences later on. Now, I think you could say that he's doing the reps slower and that he's like doing isometric holds maybe. Yeah, maybe that's true, but I mean, again, the slower reps just fall into the same problem I mentioned before. And well, personally, from my experience, isometric holds don't stimulate as much muscle growth as, working through a motion. For example, when I first started going to the gym, I focused a lot on calisthenics. And within calisthenics, there's this move called the tucked planche. So I would hold that position for like however long I used to hold it for. And I did this thinking I would get massive shoulders. But since I wasn't really moving through any motion, they just stayed the same. My shoulders barely grew. Now, I'm not saying that this is a bad exercise. If you're trying to learn the planche in calisthenics, then this is probably a really good exercise. But if you're trying to get hypertrophy in your shoulders, it probably isn't the best idea. What actually got my shoulders much bigger were doing, assisted handstand push-ups and overhead presses. Similar to my biceps, I used to do a ton of different pull-up variations. I used to do a lot of chin-ups especially. And then my biceps, they would grow. They were like pretty decent. They were, at the time at least, they were like 15.5 inches. But then once I started incorporating focused bicep curling exercises, then my biceps grew to like 16.2. I think they're like 16.7 or 17 inches right now. I don't remember the last time I checked. Now back to the topic of bicep curls, I think that it's also necessary that you get a little bit of shoulder flexion when you're doing bicep curls. There's even videos of him doing this, so I'm not sure we really disagree too much on this. In order for your arm to go through the proper pendulum motion, you actually do need to flex your shoulders a little bit. Now, if you go back to cheating, I think cheating actually can be helpful, like a little bit helpful in some specific scenarios. Not cheating too much, but just like a little hip motion in there probably doesn't hurt too much. When you're on the last few reps and you can't do any more, swinging yourself a little bit to help yourself get up probably doesn't do too much. Just don't do it like every rep, of course. Alternatively, you actually can just wait a few seconds to regain your energy and then do the curl again. And maybe this is just me being a little bit schizophrenic, but I don't like taking breaks in the middle of my sets. It feels like I'm kind of cheating. Obviously I do it sometimes, but it still feels kind of wrong. So ironically, I'll do cheat reps instead of waiting. This makes sense. The point is, cheating is worth considering the last few reps. I'm not saying it's necessary. I'm not saying it's even ideal. I'm just saying it's worth considering. Otherwise, again, I think this moderate anterior deltoid flexation that you need in order to do the bicep curl properly, and you're gonna need some relatively high load. I'm pretty sure that he can go for a lot heavier reps. Just looking at his physique, he can probably go for a little bit heavier than 30-pound dumbbells. Again, a lot of people I know, including myself, don't really feel anything unless we go like above 35, above 40 pounds. I think you really want to overload your biceps in some capacity. You're going to want to use heavy weight for your biceps in general to gain muscle to some capacity. Anything that pushes you to like, I personally like 7 to 10 reps, but I think the range is usually like, you know, like 6 to 20 reps. If you're going above 20, then it's probably not ideal for muscle gain. So yeah, again, just don't do like really strict curls. I think you need to overload yourself. And I mean, yeah, what's my source for all of this? Just look at Tristan Lee himself. Here's a video he made in January.
Wait a second, who the hell is that 4'1", 90-pound 8-year-old curling the kind of rubber weights you'd only see in your mom's late night workout class? Oh wait, that's me. Silly, right? If I could go back in time and slap those 5-pound dumbbells out of my tiny little hands, trust me, I would. Don't get it twisted. Contracting the intended muscle is certainly important, but you know what's equally as important? Progressive overload. When I first started training, I was so hyper-focused on the squeeze that I lacked progression in the weight that I was lifting. The formula is simple. Live light enough to maintain correct, strict form, but allow for enough wiggle room in the later reps of your set to actually progress the amount of weight you're lifting and provide additional stimulus to the muscle. If you keep the same weight for too long or don't change the type of stimulus you're providing, this can be by varying rep ranges or resistance profiles, your body will adapt and plateau, or even worse, regress. Ask yourself 3 questions. Is the intended muscle being stimulated? Will the technique I'm using risk injury and potentially hinder progression? Am I pushing myself hard enough to progressively overload? If you can answer these 3 questions honestly, you can stop focusing so much on that mind-muscle connection, and you'll likely be able to grow faster.
And yeah, that's going to be it for the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Peace.